Hey, here we are. Happy Monday, everybody. I'm Hannah Morgan, and this is Job Search Live. And every Monday at noon, I've been reviewing, excuse me, frog in my throat. Every Monday, I've been reviewing Summary Sunday. So here I am again doing that today. I'm going to give people a second to get in, but I did want to say hello. Hey, Eileen. Eileen, good to see you here today. Thanks for being here. Okay, so here we are. Welcome to Job Search Live. It's Monday, it's noon Eastern Time, and I'm Hannah Morgan, Career Sherpa. And I put in the comments, so hopefully you can see it, the link to Job Search Live. So go ahead and click on that so that you can see that. I'm going to be talking about what my takeaways from this week's Summary Sunday and why it's important. So as we're sort of reviewing that, you can follow along. My overarching message to each and every one of you that have been job seeking through the past 12 months, no matter when you started, I know it's been tough and it's been hard, but now is the time to get back in the game, because there is an increase in jobs being posted, and that is a wonderful sign. It means that employers have found a way to make hiring happen, that they're optimistic in the future of what is going to happen next. So that should be a great sign for you, and now is the time to jump in. So, you know, if you need a fresh restart, then I would highly recommend that. No matter what you've been doing for the last 12 months or 9 months or 7 months, whatever it is, why don't you try starting fresh, which means start all over again. Research and identify companies that you would like to work for. Refine your personal branding and messaging so that it aligns with those kinds of companies, and then reach out to people who work for those companies that you would like to work for. I'm hoping that you can do the two-step process to reach out to people. In other words, talk to people that you know well, people like your friends and your family and your past colleagues, and say, okay, I'm starting this search over again. I'm really ready to reach out to people who work at A, B company, C company, D company. Who do you know you can introduce me to? That introduction is going to be so much better for you, rather than just trying to randomly connect with people who work inside that company on LinkedIn. People outside of job search, people who are doing their jobs, are not living on LinkedIn. They very seldom log in. They're not checking invitations or messaging. They don't have time for that. They're doing their job. But what they do, where they do live, is in their in-mail, in their inbox, their regular email box. That's where they're living, and they're taking care of business, and that's where I want you to pop up. I don't want you going directly to LinkedIn and trying to connect with people there. I don't think that that's the most direct method, the best direct way to get there. So this week, in this week's Summary Sunday, there were a handful of articles. 3 were about job search strategies. 1 was about understanding the applicant tracking system. There was 1 about 5 ways to keep your job search alive and motivated, which will be great for those of us that are a little discouraged right now. Remote work, flexible work, and pay, and how that's all panning out in the job search process in today's economy. The gig economy is for all levels, and a new hybrid work report. So those were the things that I wanted to draw your attention to today. Before I jump in, if you have any questions, feel free to ask those as we go through the process. And Aline has a question, which is a really good question, so let me go ahead and answer that. When applying for a job on Indeed, should you send a cover letter? I think it's going to depend on where you're going to put that. I love the idea of writing a cover letter, because I think it gives it gives the employer a sense of why you're interested in working for them. So if they give you a way to attach an additional document, then that's perfect for the cover letter. Not all companies that have accepted that or have turned that functionality on, which is sort of a key that they don't care about a cover letter. And if that's really the case, then I would definitely find somebody inside the company to refer you. So when we're just randomly applying to a job on Indeed, you are one of 100+ candidates doing the exact same thing. And those are pretty slim odds. So I think you're going to have to do more like get a referral into the company, talk to somebody who works inside the company and ask if they can refer you for the job. If they give you the opportunity to send a cover letter, that's great. So the point is, if you don't really love that job that you're applying for, you're not going to go through all that work to get referred and to write a cover letter. If you really love that job, do more than write a cover letter. Find somebody to refer you. So I hope that helps, Elaine. I know it's a lot more work, but I would rather see you not do any work than just waste your time applying for a job online. I mean, it takes 5 seconds to do that, and that's why everybody else is doing it. You've got to do something to stand out. So in this week's Summary Sunday, the first article was 3 winning job search strategies, and that was an article by Nancy Colomer on MarketWatch. And there were 3 coaches that she talked to that gave her advice, and she wrote about it. And it was actually a summary of a conference. But hone in on your career durability. What is your career durability? It is your ability to thrive and survive during times of change. Humanize your LinkedIn profile. I will tell you, if your LinkedIn profile, if you haven't looked at your LinkedIn profile lately, I need you to go back and look at everything from the headline to your about section. And are you using personal pronouns? Are you talking about why you got into the work that you do, why you are driven to do the work that you do, how you are better and or different? You have skills, but if you just say that you're a hardworking, dedicated program manager with 10 years of experience managing complex programs and having conversations with all levels within the organization, that's nothing unique. There's nothing special about that. You've got to go and give detail that helps people understand what you mean by hardworking. I worked on a project that required 3 months of 60-hour work weeks, dedicated. I regularly have communicated with my manager to find out what else I can do to help bring the project along and get it in under the time frame. You've got to give those kinds of mini stories and examples so that people can really understand who you are. Don't write generic stuff. It's not going to connect with the reader. So I'm hoping that you'll go through and read this full article by Nancy Colomer on MarketWatch. The third thing that she says is if you're a person of color or a woman, targeting companies who appreciate diversity and inclusion would be in your best interest. And those companies exist. Just go ahead and Google companies that focus on diversity and inclusion. And you will find companies that have been recognized for that. You could also go to Glassdoor, which has a list of companies that it ranks companies by their D&I score as well. So use the tools available to you and do the right kind of search. The next article was on the ladders, and it's an interview with Najari Nandela. I can't say his name right, but he is the general manager with Oracle Talio, which is an applicant tracking system. And so if you go read that interview that he did, you will better understand that the basic framework of applicant tracking systems is great. It's wonderful. It is the employer and or the recruiters who give you, that make us go through all those additional hoops and slow the process down because they want more. They want to limit the number of people who apply and make it through the process. But the applicant tracking system by itself is not the problem. It's the people inside the company who have made all those requirements that we should be pointing our finger at, and learn how the applicant tracking system works. So that's a really helpful article for you to understand how all that stuff works. The next article is something that is so near and dear to my heart. It's 5 ways to keep going when the job search is getting you down. Your mindset really is going to determine how successful you are and how much motivation you have and all of that. So I've talked about motivation and job search a lot, and things that you can do, but this article might give you a different perspective. And I'm all about reading to learn, so I hope that helps. So SHRM did an article about remote workers expect to pay remote workers expect pay to reflect their location. Right now, as it stands, 62% of organizations have existing geographic pay policies. 62% of them. So that means that they're big enough of an organization where, based on where you live in the company, they have geographic pay policies. 44% are considering modifying those or have recently modified those policies due to an increase in full-time remote work. So this is what's going on, right? That companies like the Facebooks and the Amazons of the world, they already have done this based on where you work. There's a pay scale for that geography. So the large companies have already been doing this, but the smaller companies don't have such a thing. So if they're going to be recruiting talent from other parts of the country, then they're going to have to come up with some sort of a geographic pay policy. That's something for us all to be aware of. So just because you want to work for Facebook and because you think it's going to be a big fat salary, that's not necessarily the assumption. That shouldn't necessarily be the assumption if you live out in the rural parts of Michigan. You're not going to make the New York City salary living in Michigan because there's a geographic pay policy. Similarly, if you worked in New York City for, let's just say, Facebook, and you decide, now I'm going to move to upstate New York and go live near Albany, those employees too will be seeing a change in their salaries because they're no longer residing in the metropolitan area of New York City. So companies are getting smart about this, but it's also, a good thing for us all to understand as well. The next article was a FlexJob survey that says employees still want remote work even after the pandemic. Let me just throw these numbers out at you. 65% of those surveyed said they want to remain full-time remote. 65%. 33% prefer a hybrid work arrangement, and only 2% say they want to return to the office full-time. Those numbers, people have been surveyed about this for a while now, and we're still seeing the majority of people want full-time remote work. There's that middle percentage of people who want hybrid. They want to go in sometimes, but also like the flexibility of being able to work remote. This is something that smart companies will embrace. It works for them. It's cost effective for them. It's a little bit of a headache for them to manage. But we know that when people were working remotely for the past year, the productivity skyrocketed. So employers are seeing the benefits of productivity from having a remote workforce. 65% want to stay working remote full time. Employers will not be able to easily hold on to people or attract people if they're not obliging to that request. Just out of curiosity, how many of you here listening are really interested in only working remotely, full-time remote work? Go ahead and enter in the comment there if you're interested in full-time remote, because I think there's still a lot of people that want that. It's my impression, and I'm hoping that companies are smart about that. The next article was about fractional kind of gig work, and it was particularly of interest to me as I'm working in some of the job search clubs that I'm doing. They're more senior people, and I'm here to say that contract work, gig work, even at the most senior levels of an organization, is a thing now. They call it a fractional CMO or CXO, whatever it is, a fractional chief operations person, fractional. And so what that means is that companies don't necessarily always need a full-time person to be their chief marketing officer or their chief operations officer or their chief financial officer. Sometimes they just need somebody 2 or 3 days a week. Either they're growing, they've got a very strong person who's already the manager of that group. So there are lots of different reasons, and companies are all about saving money, and a C-level position is very expensive. So if they can bring in somebody on a contracted short-term, less than full-time basis, that's a win for them. So if you are somebody more senior in your career and you actually aren't dying to go into a full-time job again, or even if you are, maybe that's something that you can suggest as an option to some of the companies that you might have an interview with or that you're speaking with and networking with. Have you ever thought about bringing somebody in on a part-time basis 2 or 3 days a week to get this work done? It's just another option. And I get excited about this stuff because I don't think everybody really wants to work a full-time 60, 70 hour a week job. I think there are a lot of people, especially those people who are nearing retirement or looking for that bridge to retirement. These kinds of fractional or contracting part-time-ish senior roles are the perfect opportunity. So that there's an article in Fortune magazine about how this is growing as a trend. So in 2020, wages and participation for independent workers grew 33%. Because when the economy is not stable, companies don't want to invest in a full-time salaried position, so they're more likely to use contract independent workers. That's exactly what we're still seeing. For those companies that are still on the fence, not sure what's going to happen next, what a great way to get your foot in the door. And I hope that that inspires you. Going back here, Bridget is preference for hybrid. Michael wants remote 4 out of 5, which is pretty much almost full-time remote, but it's close to that. The last article that I shared was actually a Microsoft Work Trend Index study that was done just recently. And it outlined, I think there's 7, 8 things here. And I'm going to summarize it, but the reason I'm summarizing it is to tease you into reading the full report. The Microsoft Work Trend Index called out these things, that flexible work is here to stay. And flexible can mean in scheduling or remote versus on-site. It means lots of different things. So go read and understand why flexible work is here to stay. Leaders are out of touch with employees and need a wake-up call. And this was really interesting. We always have felt sometimes that leaders are out of touch, but what this shows is that because leaders did so well managing during the pandemic, they felt productive, they felt the company was doing well. Because everything was going so well for leaders in a company, they didn't see how really horrible it was for a lot of the frontline workers or the floor workers or the essential workers, and how they were feeling vulnerable, scared, blah, 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 blah. So this study really shows a series of graphs and charts that really shows the contrast between how really great it was over the pandemic for managers and leaders, but how really terrible it was for people on the front line or doing the essential work, and how leaders were out of touch and are missing out on things that they need to do for the organization. High productivity is masking an exhausted workforce. People have not learned how to draw boundaries between their home life and their work life. And so as a result, whenever they're home, they're at work, and that carries over and they don't have an off button. And that leads to exhausted workforce. People are burned out. They're tired that have been working. Gen Z is at risk and will need to be re-energized. Gen Z is the youngest generation right now in the workforce. And they are, new college graduates who probably finished their college under the umbrella of COVID, meaning that they were doing online studies their senior year. They get into the workforce and they're living in an apartment in a new city, or just living in an apartment by themselves without that structure of friends or family, and they're feeling very alone because they don't have an office to go in. They don't have any social life that is around work. So they're really suffering emotionally right now, and companies need to understand that and build in mechanisms to help partner those Gen Z up with other people in the organization. They're feeling lonely and abandoned. So shrinking networks are endangering innovation, which is an interesting thing, because when you are working from your home, as much as we want to say we're reaching out, we're networking, we're having conversations, we're doing online learning, we're not really ever doing the same amount of cross-sharing, cross-pollinating pollination of ideas simply by walking outside or going to an event after work or things that we used to do. We don't interact with as many different types of people, and when we don't interact with different types of people, we have a very singular, focused, uninfluenced point of view, and that's hurting innovation. Authenticity will spur productivity and well-being. So going back to this fact that leaders are out of touch, the sooner everybody can appreciate and become more authentic, genuine, real. In other words, their work life is not 100% separated from their home life. For longest time, we felt work is work and home is home, and I'm two different people. What this is talking about is we are entering in, because of the pandemic and because of what we've been through in the last year, that people are tired. They don't want to be two different people. They want to be genuinely themselves, and they want to be accepted for genuinely being themselves. And that's true up and down the corporate ladder. So we'll see how that will lead to better well-being for people inside the organization. Talent is everywhere in a hybrid work world. And what that means is that companies can find their next great hire anywhere in the world. So while we think that, oh, this is wonderful, I can work from anywhere, companies can pull their next hire from anywhere, not just in the United States, but in the world. And so that actually expands the amount of competition there is competing for jobs. So while it's a bad thing, it is also sort of a wake-up call for all of us to say, okay, what am I going to do to make sure that I am making the most to let people know about my own personal brand, what my unique gifts are and what my strengths are when it comes to the work that I'm doing? What can I do to stand out and get noticed for the work that I do inside my company, but also even more so important outside of my company? And that was that wonderful study by Microsoft. There was a lot in there, and I really hope you take a minute to read it. One of the things that I have always... Hi, Bert. Hi, Iz. How are you? One of the things that I'm always surprised about is the fact that people don't have some of the really important conversations they need to have with their boss. And so there's this great article by On the Muse, which is one of my favorite sources to find articles for anything related to careers. It's called The Almost Pain-Free Guide to Having the I Quit Conversation with Your Boss. So oftentimes, and this is why I'm so glad that they wrote this, is that oftentimes people get to the point where they feel they have to quit, or they want to quit, and they just go in, or they don't even go in. They write their boss an email and they say, this is my last day, bye, I'm out of here. But that is so damaging to you, and it actually is hurting your boss as well. I know you don't care about them because you want to leave, but having that difficult face-to-face conversation with your boss, explaining to them what you need in order to be successful in this job, and giving them the opportunity to respond to that, to react to that, is really very important for you. It allows them to say, oh, I didn't know that's what you needed. We can't give that to you, so good luck. And then you don't feel so bad quitting because the boss has pretty much said, you've got my permission and blessing, good luck to you out there. Your boss is probably also more likely to write a letter of recommendation or be that person who's going to write a testimonial. So ending that relationship takes a conversation. I'm hoping that you don't wait till it's the I quit. I'm hoping that every day or every week or every month or some frequency, you're having a pretty open conversation with your boss about what you need to be happy in the job. That might mean I need to be trained in this new technology, or I need to be able to attend this conference, or it means I need to attend certain meetings so I have a better sense of what's going on inside the organization. It's an ask and it's a conversation, and it's the justification why you want these things. It's not all selfish. It's because I got this training, it will make me better in this role and more valuable because blah, 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 whatever that is. So I hope that people start having more conversations with their bosses, especially like the one that is mentioned here about the I quit. And if you are thinking about quitting your job, and I know there are a lot of people who are thinking about quitting their job just because of the data I've seen, then please read that guide. It's very helpful. Um, The last article actually is really an article that I wrote. I always throw in one recent article. Did you miss this? How to write a letter of interest and effective samples. So you can go link to that and see what that's all about. But a letter of interest is also known as a proposition letter or an interest letter. It is a letter that you write without knowing whether or not there's a job available. In other words, you target a company and you say, I love what your company is doing. I just saw you mentioned in the news for this innovative new thing you're doing, and I would love to be a part of your finance team. I have this kind of experience, and these are some of the problems that I've solved in the past, and I think that your organization would benefit greatly, especially given what you're going to be embarking on. I'd love to have a conversation with you. I'll follow up next week to see when you might have time to speak. That's the essence of a letter. It does not have your resume because there's no resume to write for this. There's no job available. You're not asking them to connect on LinkedIn. You're not asking them to do anything. You're saying, I'll reach out to you to follow up to see if there's interest in this. It gives you way more power and control over this process. Sure, there are going to be people who won't want to speak with you. That's fine. But there is going to be somebody who will say yes. And I can't wait to hear when that happens for you, because it will happen if you try that method. It's a great conversation to have. Are there any questions that you all have? So, Michael, this is a question. Good question. How to prevent intelligent leaks hiring citizens of other countries. So we've got a very strict policy in our country about being even eligible to hire people from another country. I think, and don't quote me anybody on this, but I'll have to go look, but I believe that even if you want to hire somebody working remotely, you still have to have papers to work in the U.S., green card. So without that, if you're going to be on payroll, you can't be on payroll no matter where you live without authorization to work in the U.S. If they're 1099ing you, that's a little bit of a different story, and I don't know exactly how that works. But I think that companies that are doing this kind of work probably are not outsourcing some of their most important levels of work, or the things that are most secret to them. So I don't think that would really be a problem. So I'm sure anything could happen, but are there any questions, other concerns about the job? I hope you all get out there and get back in the game, especially right now when things are heating up and companies have a need. So good luck to you all. Have a great week. Thank you for being with me here today, and stay in touch, okay? Have a good one.